My interview with Joon Han is two parts. And if you're not familiar with who Joon Han is, he is a person you need to get to know. The first segment featured for November deals with podcasting. And this is a segment you won't want to miss. You might be surprised at his recommendation, but I promise that you will get some ideas that could immediately help you grow your business. So let's listen now, or watch if you're viewing on NSA's YouTube channel. Part 1 with Joon Han. Joon Han is my guest, and your website is awesomeguest.com.
Yep.
But Joon, you know a lot about podcasting.
Probably a little too much, yes.
Probably a little too
Yeah,
much.
right,
So
right.
give me a little background about you and podcasting first.
Yeah, so I'll say, about 6 years ago, if you think about the state of podcasting, there was probably only about 20,000 podcasts in the world about 6 years ago. And so we knew it would be kind of an emerging media. And so we did a weekly show for exactly 1 year, committed to do it in the most scientific way possible. We didn't do any marketing for it, we didn't promote it, but we put together a show that was audio and video. And we just wanted to see kind of how the market responds to something like that, topic-wise and production side and things like that. And it's a standalone show, and we weren't trying to grow a brand. It was just purely like almost arm's distance away. We wanted to just put a show out and see what happens. And
Just see what happened organically.
yeah, organically, because when you do a science experiment, you're like, okay, let's make 3 different kinds of segments. Let's try audio and video. It's like we checked all these little scientific boxes to just run a proper experiment.
Sure.
There was no business goal at the time. And again, about 6 years ago, there was probably about, I want to say, like 45 million English language blogs, but there's only 20,000 podcasts in the world. Now, you fast forward to today, there's probably close to about maybe 300,000, 400,000 podcasts.
Wow.
And there's still that many blogs, but the podcasts are coming up. And it's obviously
Sure.
a different medium, and for speakers, it kind of makes sense to put yourself in that kind of new media.
So let me ask this question, because one of the things that strikes me, and I've been around a while,
Yeah.
as you can tell by the Brillo pad hair. But a lot of speakers will find something that's new, and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to have a podcast.
It's that shiny new object kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
So what do we need to know?
Yeah. And so I'll say, what's great about speakers is the entrepreneur spirit. You have the proper environmental scanning, but you need to look at the opportunity and go like, well, how long is it going to take me to ramp up an infrastructure, take advantage of that? Am I too late? Am I too early? All that kind of stuff. And I would say with podcasting, the danger is that the lure, if you will, is it's so easy. You just flip on a recorder and talk about stuff. And I will tell you, it's not hard to put out a really bad podcast. And you can just churn them out and feel like you're doing something because you're talking.
Right.
And I think for speakers, it feels like you accomplished something, right? You put your thoughts out there, but if like your episode didn't have a narrative arc, or it's not produced properly, or the sound quality is not great, which you find a lot with kind of all of our phones are pretty good nowadays. They pick up pretty good quality. But I would say nowadays, because there are about close to like 500,000 podcasts and counting, there are a lot of folks that have really established, not audience maybe in the millions, but they have an audience maybe in the tens of thousands or 20s of thousands, and they're dying for guests, because some of the most, I guess one of the secrets in podcasting, some of the most successful podcasts rely on guest experts and guest content instead of saying, my name's Joon, I'm super smart. Like if I'm not famous or infamous, why are you going to listen to just me rambling, for whatever?
Right, exactly.
And so I got to have a specific point of view or a niche, and bring in guest experts like yourself, right? And we'll ask you specific questions in your point of view. I could have a photography podcast, but I'll bring on a chef, I'll bring on a professional speaker, I'll bring on a babysitter, but it'll all be in the point of view of like photography, right? Or something like that.
Sure.
And the people that are putting out the best consistent content, which is what makes a great podcast, they need guests. They have a voracious need for guests. And so that's where we would step in as if you get showcased as a guest, you already come in as like an expert, and so they're showcasing you to their very loyal audience, to say, hey, this person's an expert. And I feel like if you look at ROI or time spent, like the learning curve, it's hard for me to make the case that you should start your own show. It really makes sense. Like there are really hundreds of thousands of shows looking for you right now.
Newsflash. Joon Han just said there are hundreds of thousands of shows looking for you right now. How do you find the podcast that say, oh my gosh, we've got this voracious desire, but
it's like you got to put the two together.
Yeah, and so it is. It's kind of the wild, wild west right now. You know, completely unregulated, and you know, think about anything with drones. Like the FAA doesn't know to do the drones right now because it's just a new emerging technology. So I would say in the podcast world, you do have a lot of like traditional PR agencies moving to saying, hey, dude, I can't get you on traditional media. You know, because maybe you're the ubiquitous old white guy. You know, and you're just like, you know, there's not, you know, like.
So for those of you listening, I am the ubiquitous old white guy.
Right, but see, so we have a friend that, you know, he was a retired CEO and he fit that mold. Not famous or infamous, right? But very successful and very, very good, like voice-wise. But he's not going to get in like traditional earned media. Well, his PR agency said, well, instead of charging you thousands to get you on Good Morning America, how much would you pay us to get on these podcasts? And he's like, what the hell is a podcast? You know, all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so I think he paid like $500 a pop to get on these podcasts. But to his credit, he did like 300 interviews in 3 years. I mean, that's telling the same story like it's the first time every time, right?
Absolutely.
Kind of stuff,
Sure.
you know. And he is very folksy, very great. And you know, the thing is, so the traditional PR agency is pivoting in that direction. And then there's a lot of shows you can just reach out to directly because they are like a one-man kind of band, you know. And in a lot of it, I think the biggest mistake we see with people wanting to be guest experts is they're like, for instance, if I'm a sales guru, they're just looking up sales shows, right? Instead of saying, well, who's my target market? And then I'll be a sales expert on the show for photographers, for instance, or food trucks, or like, you know, meeting professionals, or, you know, university, whatever, you know, like, so, or like, you know, young college transition and whatnot. You look at your target market and just show up on every show within that market, because again, that guest, that host is looking for, we don't need another expert about young, you know, career transitioning or millennial experts. Oh, we need a salesperson to talk to millennials. Right. Or we need a productivity person to talk to millennials. That's different because you're not a millennial expert. They're the millennial expert. The host is. Right. You know, they're looking for people to like, you know, give some nuance to their show and their content and stuff like that. So.
Let me ask you a quick question because I'm curious about this. So you did your experiment. I mean, I'm kind of like, oh man, well, what happened? You did the experiment. You did 52. You did the podcast. You did the YouTube. What got the most views, and how did you find organic growth taking place?
Yeah, so again, what we try to do is just kind of put it out there in the wild.
See what happened.
And we didn't tell our friends or family, like, hey, promote this. We weren't trying to get like ranked on iTunes right away. We just said, what happens if you just put something out? Like if you're just a schmo, like me, and just put it out there, you feel like you have something to say. And I'll tell you, you know, on the YouTube thing, we found in the B2B space, there's not a lot of videos. I think it's probably different now, but I still don't think it's that. YouTube is mostly like a B2C, like people are looking for entertainment kind of news, whatnot. And so we got a lot of traction on YouTube just because we were the only, like, you know, for instance, I have a podcast coming out later this year strictly on like what I'm learning about Costco as a business and whatnot. And just as an experiment, we did an episode on Costco. So if you go to like yourbizrocks.com or you go to find on YouTube, that one video itself has like almost 8,000 views. And again, non-promoted, not anything. And then the average viewership of all the other episodes is about 700. So what we found was interesting is like if you just put it out there with some good keywords and whatnot, every episode naturally got to about 200, 300 views just doing nothing. Can you imagine if you actually tried to like tell your friends and family? I mean, I have more than 300 friends and family, you know, I don't know, friends or whatever, you know, but it was so interesting that something just naturally would pick that up. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you show up as a guest on a podcast, even if that podcast is not like the super famous person, a decent podcast will pick up 1,000 downloads a month, just being fairly decent. Right. So now you're in evergreen marketing content 1,000 times a month. And if it's in your target market, that's not bad. Right. You know, because the thing about podcasting, and psychologically they say some of the power behind it is very rarely do you hear someone's voice that loudly in stereo other than your own voice. So there's a real captivating thing there, because you know everything else in life you're hearing from one side or the other, or if like TV or like, you know, your friend, but it's not close, right? And so they'll say psychologically it's the only form of intimacy that can scale, because everyone's listening to you privately or stereos, or you know if they're in the car or whatnot. But most people are listening to it privately because they're working out or they're doing chores or things like that. And so it's really an interesting way to get really near and dear to people in a way that they're choosing. You know, it's like if you look at email open rates and stuff like that, they're 100% opening their emails to you. They're opening and they're click through because they're choosing to listen to you. It's really, and that's why we believe it's a phenomenal marketing thing, but maybe not necessarily do your own show.
You said, as I understand, that there are certain budgets within companies that often we as speakers don't think about or tap.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Right.
Oh my, we've run out of time. Gosh, I hate to stop here. And just when Joon was sharing with us how we tap into budgets for our services that most of us have never thought of or tapped into. Okay, you will not want to miss the second portion of my interview with Joon Han. Perhaps that will be your holiday gift, a gift that just keeps on giving in 2019. Tune in next month for Joon Han Part 2.